Welcome back, people. Hope you're all well. Little bit different. Back to club football, Arsenal related. This is going to be the first of a few that I do of the Arsenal series, which is going to be all-time Arsenal. And it's going to be around all-time Arsenal 11s. So I'm going to pick combined 11s over different topics. Of course, we're going to start off with my favourite ever Arsenal 11, which I think is the best Arsenal 11. Of course, I've not gone back in history. I've just gone by who I've seen live. I've not gone back to the Liam Brady days. I've not gone back to Malcolm McDonald days or Pat Rice or McClintock or all of these people like Cliff Baston, etc. Because I have to go by who I've seen live for who I have chosen. So I picked an 11. I picked my 11. I picked my formation. And let me know in the comments who you think I've missed out, who you think should be in this 11, what you think you agree with, what you disagree with. And of course, put your 11s in there. I'll be really interested to see what your take on Arsenal's best ever 11 is. So I am going to start, people, with who I think was probably Arsenal and England's all-time greatest, or one of at least for England, David Seaman. I think this guy for club and country was so consistent, and I think his coordination is something that never gets mentioned enough. When you look at what David Seaman was all about, of course, he was a great shot stopper, a great command of his area, superb communication with his defenders, but his coordination is probably the best I've ever seen. He knew his right hand from his left foot, everything about his body he knew in that goal. And of course, I cannot bring a picture of him up without bringing what I think is probably the best save I've ever seen against Sheffield United. This save will go down in history as being one of the greatest, if not the greatest ever save. Everybody in that stadium, everybody watching at home thought it was in. The header from that close distance should be in, but not for David Seaman. This is a save I have never seen replicated. I've seen unbelievable saves. I can think of Gordon Banks. I can think of going back to years for unbelievable saves I've been in the Premier League and other leagues for goalkeepers. But this one for me proves why he was the best. It was an outstanding save. And I can think of penalty saves from David Seaman, not just for England against Spain in Euro 96, but also, of course, for Arsenal in the Premier League against Gareth Barry, Aston Villa, unbelievable save. And of course, the one that everyone will remember going back to the early 90s against Sampdoria, the penalty save there was just outstanding. The strength of David Seaman, shovel hands, absolutely superb communication with his defence. And let's be honest, makes up probably one of the best back fives that anyone has ever seen, and certainly in Europe. That time under George Graham, unbelievable signing. And for me, there's nobody better than David Seaman to put into this side. I've seen fantastic goalkeepers, but I can honestly say, guys, that this guy is right up there. At right back, I've gone with this guy. To win what he's won at Arsenal from 89 at Anfield all the way through to when he retired in 2002, winning the double, this guy was an outstanding right back. Never got the plaudits deserved for me in an England shirt. I don't know why. Gary Neville seemed to get ahead of him. Yeah, Gary Neville was probably one of the best right backs we've seen. But for me, Lee Dixon deserves an unbelievable amount of credit for what he did consistently, his partnership in that back four, having an unbelievable understanding with the player in front of him, Ray Parlour. There was a telepathic understanding between him and his teammates. Everybody that talks about him talks highly of him as a gentleman, but what a footballing man. To get him from Stoke, from George Graham, was an absolute stroke of genius. And to go and be consistent as ever, I have to put him in. There were some close opportunities for me to look at and other options. I loved Lauren. I thought he was a very good right back. And I was a big fan, to be fair, of Bakary Sagna. But I have to go with Lee Dixon. I just thought he was superb. And for what he's won at Arsenal, who can deny me for putting this guy in? Of course, we now go over to left backs. And if I'm honest with you guys, this one was very difficult for me, and you'll see why. I was a huge fan of Nigel Winterburn, and I think we had some brilliant left backs over the years. I'm a big fan of Kieran Tierney, but I don't think he's been at the club long enough for me to select him. I think Nigel Winterburn is probably the one that everybody would look at. And obviously, Nacho Monreal and Gael Clichy did well in Arsenal shirts in the later parts of their careers. But I can't really look past this guy. Ashley Cole, for me, is probably one of the best left backs ever. I look at him like I do Paolo Maldini, like I do Roberto Carlos. And I just think that with the Premier League, he's won everything, but he's won everything domestically. He's won Champions Leagues. And I thought he was Mr. Consistent every time for club and country. I think he's probably the first left back I looked at and thought, wow, you are a left back who loves to attack. You're a defender who loves to attack. And I think sometimes because he was always going forward and crossing balls in, you sometimes forget how good he was defensively. I think Ashley Cole was really underrated defensively. I think his one-on-one defending was superb. And he was always that one to get back, make those last-ditch challenge. I feel personally as well, one of the best pieces of defending that I've seen is very hard to replay it on YouTube. But go back if you can to 2001, 2002. He's wearing the gold kit at Anfield. And how on earth he clears this ball off the line is beyond me. It's one of the best individual pieces of defending, of last-ditch defending that I've seen. He was superb. The way he left was frustrating. I kind of understood it in my mind because he could see where Arsenal were going, I think, and he didn't like that. He wanted to go and win, and he obviously knew that Chelsea were going to go and do that. Very frustrating. For me, a lot went wrong from the point that he left the club in 2006. He went to Chelsea and they literally won everything. And I think he looked at that Arsenal side and thought, do I want to play with Senderos and Denilson or do I want to play with Lampard and Terry? And I felt that he looked at where Chelsea were going and where Arsenal were going, and it was just complete chalk and cheese for him. So, listen, he went to go and win, and that's exactly what he did. I'm going to go with a centre-back pairing now, guys, which I think nobody will be shocked by. The first one that walks in is, of course, Mr. Arsenal himself. I don't think there can be an all-time Arsenal 11 without Tony Adams in it. I think when you look at what Tony Adams brought to Arsenal off the pitch, it's probably up there with the greatest of any club. I think his leadership qualities and the fact that he had an attitude that was of the ilk of jump on the ship or get off of it because we're here to play for the Arsenal. We're here to win. And I think sometimes that actually does still exist, but not quite to the same degree. Not just at Arsenal, just in general. I think when you look at what Tony Adams is about, a lot of it is off the pitch, but we shouldn't take away how great he was on it. I think this is the defender that can play. A lot of times people look at Tony Adams as a bit of the hard man and just think he's a last ditch challenger and that, he's somebody that will just rough you up. He could play football. My God, he could play football. And that celebration there is iconic. Of course, he's got a statue outside the Emirates now. I think that goal will go down as one of the greatest Arsenal goals because of who it was and the way that it come about. Steve Bold putting him through and then absolutely half volleying it with his left foot into the bottom corner against Everton to win us the championship, I thought for me was unbelievable. So yeah, I've got to pick Tony Adams. Who could not? Who could leave Tony Adams out of here? And the partner I've gone with, I could have put a few, to be honest. Centre backs over the past that I've seen have all been good. In the Emirates era, maybe not so much. I'm a big fan of Kolo Toure, Lauren Koscielny and Mertesacker had a good partnership. Steve Bold and Martin Keown, very underrated for me. Very, very, very underrated. But I can't really not pick Sol Campbell. Buying him from Tottenham will still go down as one of the most amazing bits of transfer business in Premier League history and maybe in football history. For him to travel over North London, go to the other side, the age that he did, being, let's be honest, their captain and their absolute rock at the back. Yeah, he came over to Arsenal and won the double. And what a player he was. Our rock, somebody who I always looked at as Mr. Reliable at the back. He would always sweep up for us if need be. He did have pace and power. He could get up for headers and score goals. Obviously, a fantastically iconic one in the Champions League final, which we won't go into. But what a player Sol Campbell was. And I think that when you look at what we were doing in that time between 2001 to say 2006, that period was extremely successful for Arsenal. Titles, unbeaten, invincibles, domestic cups. He was pivotal to that. He was an athlete, but he was also a leader throughout the spine of our team. And I cannot leave him out. He, for me, will go down as one of the greatest centre-backs alongside Tony Adams. So I have to put them both in as my partnership. Then we move into midfield. Now, I didn't know what formation to go with. Do I go with a 2 in midfield? Do I go with a 3? Do I play 4-4-2, 4-3-3? Do I play 3-5-2? There's so many options I could have to try and shoehorn so many of these players that have been so great for me. But I've gone with 3 in midfield because I had to put 3 up top. And the first player is probably one of the greatest players to ever put the shirt on. Patrick Vieira. The biggest compliment I can give Patrick Vieira is to link him with a guy I've just spoken about, Tony Adams. When Tony Adams left Arsenal, I thought, wow, how the hell are we going to have a captain as good as him? And I don't think it was spoken about as much because I don't think it was needed. Vieira was such a leader. The leadership qualities you show on the pitch, the spine was massively down to him. I talk about athletes, I talk about powerhouses. I don't think there's a Premier League midfielder in history that can do as much as Patrick Vieira could. I love Gerrard, I love Scholes, I love Keane, I love Lampard, I love Yaya Toure. There's so many that I look at now. Kevin De Bruyne are even still doing it to this day. I don't think any of those are as all-rounded as Patrick Vieira. Patrick Vieira could tackle, he could shoot, he could pass, he could attack, he could defend, he could get into a sliding tackle, he could win stuff in the air. Show me something that Patrick Vieira couldn't do. I'll wait. This is why he walks into every single Premier League all-time 11. So he's definitely walking into my Arsenal one. I think when he left, it was the start of the decline of Arsenal Football Club. It really was. That for me rips out the heart. When he left and Patrick Vieira and Ashley Cole and the likes of Henry were leaving, it was a sad moment in the history of Arsenal Football Club because for me it was saying goodbye to a huge era that I felt we were probably never going to see again. And maybe we won't see players like Patrick Vieira or Thierry Henry again. I hope we do one day, even if they don't play for Arsenal because they're a joy to watch. But I do think we need to remember this period as wow. This was special. One of Arsene Wenger's first signings in 1996, won the double in 98, the double in 2001, 2002. And how ironic, or how iconic that his last kick was to win us the FA Cup in 2005 against his rivals, absolutely horrendously bad rivals at the time, Manchester United and, of course, Roy Keane. I think this guy will go down in history as one of the greatest ever players. And if I was to pick a world 11, he'd actually be considered in it along with the likes of Zidane's and Xavi's and Iniesta's and Pirlo's because this guy was unbelievable. So Patrick Vieira, I love you. And you walk into my 1 to 11. Alongside him, I had to think how I was going to play this formation. So I've gone with him as a kind of holding midfielder. I've left out unbelievable players. I've left out Gilberto Silva. I've left out Edu. I've left out Santi Cazorla. I've left out Aaron Ramsey. But I had to look at who I felt deserved to be in this 1 to 11 of my opinion players I've seen live. And the player that I had to put alongside him to the right of him was this guy. Probably one of my favourite players of the Emirates era. Doesn't really count when you look at the Emirates era because obviously he was with us at Highbury, so he's never considered an Emirates player. But let's be honest, most of the good things that happened when Cesc Fabregas was at Arsenal happened at the Emirates. I was really, really sad when he went. And I understood it. I understood it. He gave his all. He gave 110%. And I don't really blame him for coming back and not going to Arsenal because apparently Arsene Wenger didn't want him. If Arsene Wenger doesn't want you, you're not going to sit there and start begging. So for me, he had to go where he felt was necessary. And at the time, it was unfortunately Chelsea where he went and won stuff. He went back home to Barcelona. And to be fair, I never really blamed him for that either because he gave his all when he was at us between the years of 2003 and 2010. And those 7 years, he became an absolute hero. I think when we were going through the transitional period towards the move from Highbury to the Emirates, he was our best player. And once Henry had left and Gilberto had gone and we'd lost Pires and Ljungberg and Toure, he stayed and was seen as the captain and the leader. And at the age of about 22, he was by far one of the best centre midfielders in the world and we had him. I was so impressed with some of the goals that he scored in big games. I can remember goals against Barcelona, against Manchester United, against AC Milan, against Chelsea, against Spurs. I think he scored against all of the big boys, if I'm honest with you, and was absolutely pivotal. I don't think we've had another centre midfielder like him. I think him and Vieira are two very, very unique centre midfielders that Arsenal have had over the years that will probably have to go back to the Liam Brady days for you to even replicate how good these were. I don't think we've had a centre midfielder as good as Fabregas and in the ilk of Fabregas since he's gone, and likewise Patrick Vieira. I think we've tried to with the likes of Santi Cazorla, Aaron Ramsey. For me, completely different players. I don't think Aaron Ramsey or Santi Cazorla were in the same mould as footballers as Cesc Fabregas. For me, Fabregas was what I call a proper centre midfielder that could play box to box, that could go into the attacking role and that could sit back and dictate play and pull the strings also. I really was a huge fan and it was gutting to see him go and he walks into my 1 to 11. Now it's interesting. What do I do? I've not gone with wide players. I've gone with 3 and 3. So I haven't got Ray Parler. I don't have Freddie Ljungberg. I don't have Theo Walcott. I don't have Alexis Sanchez. I think if I was playing a winger, I probably would go with Alexis Sanchez because for me, he was the best player in the Emirates era and so important to us. I wasn't able to see Rocky play too long, so I couldn't go for Rocky Rocastle. But again, lots of people saying that he would absolutely walk in. I was a huge fan of Anders Limpar and Mark Overmars on the left-hand side. I love Thomas Rosicky. But the one player I had to pick that could play in this three is one of my favourites. Robert Pires deserves to be in this side, and I'll tell you why. The biggest compliment I can give him is that the best left winger that people say the Premier League has seen and the most decorated player is Ryan Giggs. And at one stage in his career, Robert Pires was better than Ryan Giggs. Around the 2000 to 2005 mark, he was better than Ryan Giggs, in my opinion. Ryan Giggs was a very different player. He was a lot more direct. He'd take a lot more players on. But Robert Pires had an understanding and belief that he would be able in every game to either create or score goals. And he managed to do it. In 2001, 2002, when he got that horrendous injury, I thought he was one of the best players in the world. He was absolutely outstanding. And he had a bit of a tough time in France, from what I hear. Arsene Wenger believed in him, brought him to England. And I think the first few games he got beaten up a bit, but he utilised, he adapted, he got all of his attributes to what I thought was to one of the best of his ability, and his understanding with Thierry Henry and Patrick Vieira was sensational. So I have to look at him for what he won at club and country. He has to go into this side. I understand it's difficult. There's probably people screaming at me now, going, "How have you left him out? How can't you put him in the midfield?" I just couldn't. I could not leave Pires, Vieira, or Fabregas out. I just couldn't do it. So for me, those three walk in. Now it becomes difficult, doesn't it? Now it becomes difficult. I've got three to put up front, and I've seen some unbelievable strikers in my time. But I have to put these three in because for me, they're the three best. I couldn't leave one of them out. I just couldn't. And when people say, how can you leave Lundberg and Sanchez out? I can because I couldn't leave the other three guys out. That for me is why I've picked these three. The first one is my number 10, who for me is the best number 10 that I've ever seen, and it's Dennis Bergkamp. For me, the best player to wear the shirt. A lot of people would say it's others, but for me, it's Dennis Bergkamp all day long. I don't think the players around him would be anything without Dennis Bergkamp. You look at what he's done for club and country and some of the individual goals he scored. He, for me, is in the special bracket. There's not many Premier League players I can say that are, but he's one of them. I was a huge fan of the Zolas and the Eric Cantonas and the Matt Letizier's, the Paolo Di Canios. They all did something a little bit special. But for me, Dennis Bergkamp even leaves those players dead in the water. This guy was unreal. The Iceman, the introvert, the one that literally everybody looked up to and looked into the dressing room as the one to be the role model for. He was outstanding. I look at some of the goals, the goal against Leicester, which I'll bring up now. That goal for me was unbelievable. What a hat trick. That ball from David Platt to take it down like he did, round Matt Elliott, who at the time was a really good centre half, and past Casey Keller. That has got to go down as one of his greatest ever goals. I prefer personally the one against Newcastle because I don't think it's ever been replicated. To take it round Dabby's ass like that and then to slot it home past Shay Given. I thought in that season he was one of the best players. In 1997 to 98, he got Player of the Year, and rightly so. He was unbelievable. And then I look at how he's performed from right up until the age of 37. There was not 1 minute where he wasn't focused on being the best. There wasn't 1 minute in training, from what you hear, that he wasn't like he was when he was 21. I remember Robin Van Persie coming to Arsenal, and then they asked him who he was most excited to play with. And of course, he said Dennis Bergkamp because of the Dutch connection. But he said he remembers seeing him in training, and he remembers watching Piggy in the middle and everybody giving the ball away but one player. He's 36 at the time, by the way, remember? He didn't give it away once. And he just sat there and thought, how is that possible? Like, everybody's giving this ball away at one stage. He didn't give the ball away once. Paul Merson, I remember when he was signed, he looked at him and he said, Inter Milan must be good. Because if they're getting rid of him, I don't want to play Inter Milan. And him and Righty, I remember, had this amazing telepathy. And then obviously Dennis Bergkamp playing with Anelka, Thierry Henry, Ian Wright. Ask all those players, Van Persie included, who they love the most. It's Dennis Bergkamp. Because he set them up so much. He had so much skill. He put a ball on a plate for you. One of the best players I've ever seen. Definitely for me, the best player to wear the shirt. And he has to walk into my number 10 as my 1 to 11. Then I've gone with two players either side of him that I have to say are two of my favourites. Two of my favourites. My favourite player in the history of the club walks in. It's this guy. I remember when he scored the most goals for Arsenal, beating Cliff Baston's record, and I remember him taking off the vest, which I'll show you. And he's done it one too early. That's just typical righty. He couldn't wait. Um, Gets 178 goals and takes off the shirt that says 179. But then what happens? He goes and scores again in the exact same game and then does this celebration. I loved Righty. I loved everything about Ian Wright. Ian Wright for me, for goal celebrations, for character, for pure finishing. One of the best strikers we'll see in Premier League history. One of the best finishers you'll see in Premier League history. And Wright, he could score all sorts of goals, by the way. You know, people think Ian Wright is just a fox in the box. Think again. You look at the hat-trick he scored against Swindon, the goal from there. You look at the goals he scored from outside the box, the tap-ins, ones with his head, ones where he's taken it round players, ones where he's dribbled past 3 or 4, ones where he's slotted them home. The amount of work rate he had as well off the ball was really underrated. I remember Kevin Campbell saying to me, we were the perfect right partnership, and I agree with that. And it's a shame that we didn't see more of KC and Ian Wright together, because for me, what a formidable partnership that would have been in Premier League history if that would have continued. A certain Dennis Bergkamp was signed and stopped that, by the way. And of course, the rest is history. But I think Kevin will always say he was the best strike partnership that he had, or one of at least. Ian Wright, for me, will always be my favourite player. He was my hero growing up. I was born in 87, and when I was around about 4 or 5, I remember signing him and getting very excited because he was the one that was better than everybody else on the pitch. And I always wondered why that was. My God, what a talent. He has to be into this side. The amount of times that I see him left out of Arsenal 11s, I can't understand it. I don't understand why. The guy was an absolute goal machine, and you have to have him in there. And the person that people always say is the number one is my last guy who makes up my 4-3-3. Thierry Henry is the top goal scorer of Arsenal, which means he's got to be recognised as one of the best ever. And I actually think he's probably the greatest striker ever when you look at what strikers do. He could do everything. Started off as a winger, and you could see that because he brought some of that into his game, hugging that left-hand side, hogging that area. And for me, would take it past everybody and score. And I've seen some compliments about him. I've seen some very nice things said about him. And one that always sticks in my mind is Paul Merson. If you're at a wedding or a birthday, guys, and you have like a load of kids that are outside playing football, they kick around, and the adults get involved and they start taking it rings round players and putting it in the goal as a laugh. That's what Thierry Henry did, but for real. Thierry Henry would look like he was playing in the under 13 side as an adult, because he'd be taking it round everybody and putting them in. The goals he scored against Spurs, against Liverpool, the goals for me that he scored free kick wise, I remember against Juventus, Aston Villa, against Roma. He scored unbelievable goals at the Emirates. I remember his last ever Arsenal goal before he did come back on loan was his header at the Emirates in our first year at the Emirates against Man United in the last kick of the game. I see so many amazing things about this guy. I look at the goal in the Champions League run that we had against Real Madrid. He's taken it round everybody. I remember him scoring a fantastic goal at Upton Park where he literally flicked out with his left foot, turned, spun, shot and above David James and in. I've seen so many goals from this guy that I think, wow. And of course, the iconic one at Highbury where he flicked it up and he's literally turned and shot and it's gone over Barthez' head in 2001, 2002. This player was special. And I always felt that he scored important goals. Massively important goal here against Spurs, 1-1, the lasagna season that we actually got top 4, which I'd love to remind everybody about. Wearing the same shirt that I've got behind me, obviously with Bergkamp on the back. That was an unbelievable home shirt. I loved that home shirt for that year. For me, we've seen an absolute great. And along with R9, probably the best striker I've seen in my footballing era. I don't think we'll see another Thierry Henry. I really don't. I don't know how anyone can not say he's the Premier League's greatest player, because he could do everything. And he will be up there and recognised as one of the best for me. An absolutely outstanding talent, and one that I look at and just think, wow, you are a genius. So there you have it. That is my Arsenal 11. Love to hear yours. I'm going to put it up now on the screen. I've gone for David Seaman in goal. My back four at right back is Lee Dixon. At centre back is Tony Adams. Partnering Tony Adams at centre back is Sol Campbell. My left back is Ashley Cole. And I've gone with a 4-3-3 formation with Patrick Vieira in centre midfield. At right centre midfield, I've gone with Cesc Fabregas. At left centre midfield, I've gone with Robert Pires. And in my front three, my number 10 is, of course, Dennis Bergkamp at the tip of that diamond. And then I've gone with Ian Wright and Thierry Henry either side of him. That team right there is going to do serious damage to any Premier League team. I don't care what anybody says. That for me is my Arsenal 11. I'd love to hear yours, guys. Please let me know in the description, in the comments, what you believe is your best 11 and who you think you can't believe that I've left out. There's so many players that could have tried to force in. I could not leave Ian Wright, Thierry Henry, or Dennis Bergkamp out, so I had to go with three in midfield. But you might want to choose some other players. You might not have seen some of those players. You might have seen them, and you might not have picked them. You might have gone with more Emirates theories. You might have gone with Aubameyangs or Van Persie's or Olivier Giroud's maybe. Let me know. Be really interested to see who you've gone for in the comments. That completes the first one of these. I'm going to be doing quite a few of them. So you're going to be seeing a lot of me. I'm going to be doing Arsenal 11s for different topics. But of course, I thought I'd start with my favourite. We'll see you next time. Take it easy. And of course, up the Arsenal. And please, do me a favour. Like and subscribe on your way out and help me on the road to 7K people. Take care. We'll see you next time and up the Arsenal.